Hello and welcome to Thursday's episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host Craig Fowler and I am joined via Riverside by Duncan McKay.
Hello.
And Mr. Thomas Alexander Watt.
Hello.
And we are going to be reviewing the 4 games which took place in the Viaplay Cup quarter-finals as Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen and Rangers made it to Hampden. Guys, actually, will we start off with the draw itself? So it came out that Hearts and Rangers...
spoilers for people.
Already said who made it through.
I know, you've spoiled it.
Hearts and Rangers will be playing each other on the Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and Hibs and Aberdeen will be facing each other at 5:30 on the Saturday. I'll start off. I just wanted anybody but Hibs. I am fucking sick of playing Hibs at Hampden. I know we win every time, and there's surely got to be a lot of people thinking, well, how... I mean, are you really complaining about your diamond shoes being too tight? But it's the old law of averages has got me nervous. Stephen Naismith's got me nervous. Nick Montgomery's got me nervous. And also as well, I mean, this used to be a rare occasion that you would be like, oh God, I'm absolutely shitting myself about this. But, you know, it's a kind of once in a generational type thing. It's just happening all the time now, and it just means that for 5 weeks or whatever after a draw is made, I can't sleep properly, and it's all I think about. So I'm just like, I can do without this. So I was literally like, after, like, I was flicking through the 3 of the games on the Wednesday, and as it was kind of Hibs had won, and I was a bit annoyed about that, especially since I'd watched the first half of Rangers, and I'd turned over to say, I wonder, let's watch the second half of Hibs, and they were getting beat, and then by the time I'd finished watching, they were 2-1 up, and I was just raging about that, and then I was just annoyed about them going through, and then I was just really nervous about meeting Hibs in a semi, again, and so when it came out, Hearts first team out, I was like, oh no, not Hibs, anyone but Hibs, and then it was Rangers, I was like, fine, I'll take it, I would have preferred Aberdeen, but I'll take it. Duncan, were you the same, or have you bought into Tony? Are you buying what Tony is selling when he's just like all this positivity around Hibs and you want to face Hearts because you think you'll win?
Oh, I've got all the positivity. I still didn't want to play you. Like, I thought that if let's be honest, even during the famous 5, during Turnbull's Tornadoes, like, well, okay, we had a really good result during the Turnbull's Tornadoes era, but even when Hibs are like at their peak, they'll still fuck it against Hearts. Like, that, there's no... form goes out the window in that regard. Like, we have an appalling record against Hearts, and that's not going to change. And, I mean, yeah. So, it was that sort of thing. I was like, happy. We were... me and Tony were there last night with a friend of the podcast, Chris Finn, and, yeah, we were like, as long as we get a Saturday and not Hearts, yeah, that'll be good. Because I do fancy our chances against anyone. So, you know, I would have, yeah, in terms of priority, who we wanted, it was probably Aberdeen, then Rangers, then Hearts, just as an ability to enjoy a game of football. And as you said, like the build up to it as well, because it's just going to, like, if it had been Hearts, then, you know, we'd had the derby on the 7th coming up, and then it was going to be another just a month of just that slowly being cranked up the whole way, and so instead I look forward to playing Rangers in the final.
Thom, it's always the case that Hearts win the games at Tynecastle and Aberdeen win the games at Pittodrie. We don't have much evidence about games at Hampden. So, did you want Hearts or did you want Hibs? Or did you want Rangers?
I really didn't care. I mean, it's weird to be... Normally in the semi-finals, it's just anyone but Celtic. Just don't give us Celtic. Yeah. It's just, like... I've seen that film too many times where you're like, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is what... And you're like 1-0 down after 9 minutes. And it's like, this is just... Why? Why did I waste my day?
What am I doing with my life?
Yeah. So, like... you know, semi-final, Rangers haven't looked particularly special this season, plus they're going to have added pressure of the fact that they're going to be favourites for the whole thing, and they've not been great in the cup competitions, and there's no Celtic, so even more pressure on them. I really didn't care. I knew we'd get the Saturday game, which is great, because we're away in Greece the following Thursday, so knew that we'd have the Saturday one, which is good, but I didn't really mind at that stage who There's not in theory, Rangers got a far better squad than everybody else. There's not a huge amount between the other 3 teams. you kind of just take who you get at that stage. I think happy enough to just be there and hopefully build a bit of momentum leading up to it. But no, there wasn't anyone that I thought that would be the one. That would be the one that we'd want.
It does feel like the 4 teams involved are very. I don't know why this image comes down, but the final scenes. Here's a spoiler: final scenes of Reservoir Dogs. In terms of like, there's a real opportunity for all 4 teams to be able to actually kill each other, sort of thing.
Which ones? No, actually, I know already. Hearts is Mr. Orange, already on the ground, bleeding out, dying.
But still being petulant enough not to go to take bodies with them, sort of thing. But it is that element is that as Thom was saying, like Celtic won up until about 10 years ago. You always had fancied slightly your chances. You thought you were potentially had a chance against Celtic in a semi-final or final.
Well, 11 years ago, Hearts defeated Celtic in a semi-final at Hampden.
Exactly, and Ross County had their moment and stuff like that. But since then, they've kind of been. I've not checked the records.
Ever since Rodgers came in first time.
You've basically, and even then, Dyla, like they did all right. Like if they got knocked out early, sort of thing. Whereas, which they have done this season, which is quite nice. But as soon as it got to Hampden, you're like, yeah, this team's going to turn up. It doesn't like it's going to hit. Tom Rogic is going to be wheeled out, from wherever, and he's going to be able to find the gumption after 2 years. It's like 2 years of sloth that he's going to then be able to find a bit of pace and score a goal or anything like that. Whereas, we've all seen. I'm going to say this version of Rangers has been susceptible. Like when they are. Slight, not in European games, but domestically, they're bottlers in games like this. So you always fancy your chance, and but then I think it's Hibs or Aberdeen would be more capable of setting Rangers than Hearts are, just based on current form. But that's just an opinion, not a fact.
Right, Duncan, it's fine.
Yeah.
I was about to start screaming at you. Let's get to the games, and let's start with your team, Duncan. Hibs defeating St Mirren 4-2 on Wednesday evening. You recently said on a podcast with Tony that you thought that Hibs had the best attack in the league. You then rode it back ever so slightly by saying if you take away Kyogo from Celtic, they've then got the best attack in the league.
Which then you did sort of agree with. So...
No, I'm still not agreeing with that. It's still absolutely mental. It's still absolutely mental. I can see where you're coming from, but it's still absolutely mental because if you put Christian Doidge and Eli Johan in a Rangers shirt in front of 50,000 people at Ibrox, I don't think they're going to cope with that too well. However,
I think they'd be top of the league by now. Easy. Have you seen who they're playing up front at the moment?
Yes, these players have much better pedigrees.
Not an issue.
There are different levels to this, Duncan. You surely know this.
Yeah,
but anyway,
and Christian Doidge and Eli Johan are right at the top.
I think that I do agree that Hibs have a very good attack and certainly, I mean, you can maybe argue that in terms of a twosome, when they're at their best, and that is the key factor in this, because one of them has not looked at their best this season. Aberdeen have a better pairing in Duke and Majowski, but Duke has been crap for most of this campaign so far. But in terms of depth and in terms of variation, Hibs do have a very good fivesome going on there. Fivesome? That's not a word.
Quintet.
Yeah, that's right.
A very good quintet there.
Quality quintet.
And it showed on Wednesday. I mean, Eli Johan was credited with the first goal, but I don't think he should have been. It looked like an own goal to me. But anyway, he's scoring one, Vente's getting another, and then Martin Boyle's getting another two. And it just means that Hibs, for all their defensive frailties, and those are here to stay until at least they could get somebody else in, or maybe a couple of players in January, because to me the personnel is just not good enough. It doesn't matter who you have as manager, they're going to struggle for clean sheets with that defence and a goalkeeper that at points this season and last season looked finished. But the plan is to outscore your opponents, and that's certainly working so far.
Yeah, I'm going to slightly correct you on that in terms of it worked last night. It worked in the second half of last night. The first half of that game, Hibs were reeking of Maloney ball. It was very, very tepid. Bizarre that you can play 4-2-4, and yet it's Christian Doidge that's making all the running on the balls that have been slipped through. It was not a great standard. But yeah, but they got a rocket at half time, obviously, because they came out in the second half like a train. And it was that thing of St Mirren were absolutely delighted the way that Hibs were playing in the first half, because going forward we were just so slow and so methodical, and St Mirren were like, brilliant, thank you. This is like an opportunity to be able to reset and literally set in 2 sets of 5s. Brilliant. Couldn't have asked for a better setup. And then they get the goal from Tanzer, and yeah, it was going in at half time. You were just like, oh dear, this is we've seen this one before. But credit to Montgomery in terms of what he did is then his triple substitution when we were 2-1 up was bold. I think it felt like it was one of those, you sometimes see it a bit more so in rugby union or whatever, where they've got a set time where they're making the subs, and and regardless of what's happening in the game, that's when they're making the subs, and that did feel that way in the triple substitution, because in the 5 minutes before that, St Mirren were starting to get a foothold back in the game. And I think that's the issue with how Hibs are set up at the moment, is that the intensity has to be there the whole time in terms of attacking, because we do not have the quality to be able to sit back and let things kind of consolidate more than anything. Like you can't. I don't think you can really properly consolidate with a midfield of just Joe Newell and Jimmy Jago. The strikers are running a lot in terms of getting back, but it's not in a prescribed manner, which is a bit of concern. But yeah, I think there's, based on that first half, Rocky. I've been a staunch defender of him for when he came in, and thought he was getting a lot of undue criticism. The criticism now is entirely legitimate. He is so off it. He looks like he looks like he could batter me 6 times a week, and then twice on a Sunday. Like
I'm sure Rory Whittaker could do that, Duncan. To be fair, and he could do it to all of us.
Maybe, but. We've been on the night out with Stone Cold Andy Harrow. Let's not. Like,
of course. Yeah, you can batter anybody but Andy. Andy Harrow would then leap to our defence and scare him off.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine. But he last night, Rocky was awful. Couldn't do any of the things he's meant to. Like, doesn't track the ball, doesn't track runners. Like, everything his passing wasn't accurate enough, and that aligned with, I think Montgomery is going to have to, at a certain stage, make a decision on David Marshall, because he's just that relationship between the two centre halves and David Marshall isn't working at the moment, and it feels like he's more wedded to either Rocky and Fish or Paul Hanlon if he fights his way back in than he is to David Marshall, because he's just causing anxiety amongst the defence more than anything. And if you don't defend as badly as Hibs do, you can't have that anxiety with the goalkeeper. So I'll be quite interested to see what he does with that. But going forward, we're fucking class. It's a real treat, and it's just that variety of being able to shuffle the pack and have different options as well, which is an absolute treat. I would recommend just starting 4 strikers. It's quite a laugh.
It certainly looks a lot of fun. So you're pro triple change. I know that friend of the show Chris Finn, and I imagine some other Hibs fans were not, especially since Hibs conceded a goal not long afterwards.
I wasn't pro it. I thought it was one of those things that seemed prearranged and not indicative of what was actually happening in the game, which I thought was a slightly alarming, because within 70 seconds, 2 of the people you've brought on are involved in conceding a really basic goal. But again, it's Montgomery. It's early days. These are the sort of tweaks he probably would have liked to have had a pre-season to have a play with. Instead, he's got to take these opportunities, I suppose, with 20 minutes to go in cup games when you've also got another game on the Saturday. Not getting into the Michael DeBeal territory of complaining about how difficult every team has it to be playing 3 games in a week. It must be a real shock to him when he sees the fixture list every single fucking year. So yeah, I think it was naive, even maybe cocky to have made the triple substitution. I can understand why he was wanting to do it, but at the same time, I don't think it was such a good idea because for a while it was like, well, now you've just taken Venti and Yuan off, and we now need a goal because none of us want to be hanging around for another half hour doing extra time. Thank you very much.
Thom, St Mirren have got a lot of praise for their season so far, and I'm certainly one person I still... Well, before Wednesday night, I was thoroughly kind of backing them for third place this season because I just felt that the so-called big three that are underneath the big two have all kind of got major flaws with them and question marks both in the terms of the dugout and on the field. However, I think that's now the third game this season where I've been surprised for a team that gets so much praise for their defensive solidity and organisation has been so porous defensively, because they conceded twice very early in the second half where they must have known that Hibs were going to get a kick up the backside at half time and were going to come roaring out in the second half, and then they get themselves back into the game at 2 each, only 15 minutes left, and they only last 4 minutes before they concede again.
I think, though, the main reason I think St Mirren deserve an awful lot of credit is because they are performing beyond the squad. Like there isn't a massive amount of difference, some personnel tweaks here and there, but there's not a massive amount of difference in the perceived overall quality of the squad than what they had 3-4 years ago, and when they were struggling down at the bottom of the table. And some of the players that they've taken in, Scott Tanser, O'Hara, Alex Gogic, Fraser, Greg Kiltie as well, who were fine. They were perfectly passable, but have stepped up a level or two. So I think they'll be a top six side, but I would be surprised if, come the end of the season, they can continue the momentum. Partly because the size of the squad, but also that they work very well in a certain way. They work very well with the overlapping with the wing backs going one side to the other. They switch play very cleverly, and they are solid. Like they run, that entire squad runs harder and more than no stats to back this up, but certainly from looking at them, they chase everything down. But there is that will only get you so far when you're up against better quality players. And I think, more of a credit to Hibs, and we've already mentioned, the front four. When you're up against, and a back three effectively against a front four is, it's a bit of a Hail Mary, but you're going to be overwhelmed at times. And while I think St Mirren's, the credit that they've had this season has been absolutely deserved, and I think they'll keep plugging away. They've started the season unbelievably well. I can't see that momentum continuing purely because of the quality of the squad they've got. And I think that was the problem last night as much as anything. It wasn't necessarily that they were less organised. They're just being told to deal with 4 entirely different independent threats, and they only really do have, they don't have a plan B, and that's not a criticism. Their plan A is really, really good, and they've been able to nip and tuck and move the personnel around as much more than anything. But I don't know. I think it's more of a credit, slight fortune, but also credit where it's due to just overload the play to your strengths. Let's call it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right about St Mirren this season. I think if they come third, if they do finish third or even higher than fifth, I would say, so third or fourth. It'll be because they are fully taking advantage of others' mishaps. Like they are greater than the sum of their parts, because some of their parts are pretty ropey, and you could just see that, but in terms of what Montgomery was able to do with substitutions versus what Stephen Robinson's able to do with substitutions, and that's even before this is relatively early in the season. This is before we're getting...
I'm gonna take exception to that, because St Mirren did make a triple change, which helped give them the impetus to get back into the game, and it was bringing on Keanu Bacchus, Connor McMenamin, who I was surprised didn't start because he's been an excellent signing so far this season, and Alex Grieve, who, as we know, is always good for a late goal and has done it at Easter Road already this season, coming on for Kiltie, Mandron, and Boyd Munce. But
they're essentially, you're replacing like with like largely. You're not, because I don't think you're getting something amazingly different in the way that Hibs can turn to Adam Lafondra, and that is that's a different sort of threat. And I think that that is where St Mirren are. Like they are, aside with the budget they are, and I think that they're doing really well. But their success relies on taking advantage of Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen, and others not turn up and give. They're giving 100%, and it relies on Hibs and Hearts and etc. to be playing about 90, a bit less than that, because they will probably outrun. They'll probably run over the top of you.
I don't know about that, because I think St Mirren are a team that make you play at 90%. Like, quite often if you play against St Mirren, you can be easily thrown off your own game by the way they play, and they are a team that is kind of built to play against the bigger teams, because they're a team that don't necessarily want to have possession. They want to hit you on the counter attack, and they want to take advantage of your, it's not the word I'm looking for, but arrogance to
Oh, I think that's a fair point, but I think it's that lack of flexibility means that they're not going to run over the top of the bottom six, in terms of, and that's how you accumulate the points to definitely make, to make third or fourth. You need to be just regularly, you're taking, you're guaranteed a win at home. Oh, not getting this a guaranteed. That's Hibs, Hearts, and Aberdeen. Let's be honest, but you're taking 4+ points per home and away against those other teams.
They did consistently win at home last season, and I suppose that would be the key this season, to do it again, because now they have actually started picking up points away from them, which they didn't do last season until like March or whatever. But we need to move on for this game. Let's go to the Highlands, shall we? Ross County 1, Aberdeen 2. Aberdeen opened the scoring through Graham Shinney. County then had a man sent off with Jack Baldwin.
Shock.
Not for the first time this season, letting his side down a bit, and then Aberdeen are able to finish the game off with Esther Sulker scoring. County did manage to pull one back from the penalty spot, Kyle Turner, after Slobodan Rubizic was adjudged to have committed a foul, but Aberdeen make their way to the semis. Tom, you watched this one for us. I haven't even seen the highlights yet because they're not out, because fuck Viaplay. What did you make of this game? And what happened? What happened in the incidents? I don't know. I've just read about them.
Well, it's always a bit weird when you play the same team back to back, because you assume, and everybody assumes, you're just not going to get the same sort of game. And for about 70 minutes, it was exactly the same sort of game. It was like they picked up from the 4-0 and County play. I mean, fair enough, they had a man sent off incredibly early on, but it pretty much for 70 minutes was. I don't think Ross County had a shot on goal until the last 15 minutes of the game. Again, for obvious reasons, but they set up this with the same system. Malcolm McKay kind of set up with exactly the same system as he played on Sunday. A couple of changes to the midfield personnel wise, and Jordan White came back in, but they effectively played exactly the same way and had. So there was an awful lot of space. The two caveats to this are, one, Graham Shinney opens the scoring really, really early on, and it is an unbelievably good goal. It's not like if you think of whatever a typical Graham Shinney goal is, this is not it. It's the ball. They clear their Ross County clear their lines, and it sits up for him on the edge of the box, and he left foot volleys it into the top corner, and it is unbelievably good. But a really early goal from that point kind of, it felt like it killed it as a contest, and Bojan Miovski missed a couple of good chances. There were a couple of good shouts. One really good shout for a penalty that wasn't given. I think Baldwin deserved. The sending off was definitely a sending off, but it's a ball over the top. Baldwin's got control of it, and Duke's running up behind him and clearly closing it down. But the way you watch the highlights, you're like, Ross Laidlaw's got to come out for that. Surely he's not coming out for that. And then he comes into shot and he's backing off, and you're like, what are you doing? And when Baldwin gets sent off, he knows he's going. He stands up, and the first thing he does is just turn to his goalkeeper, and it's like, what what were you doing? Like, what were you expecting me to do with this? Like, yeah, you could have just leathered out for a corner or something, but he did not get an awful lot of help in that. Yes, he did get bullied off a ball that was his all along, but he didn't get an awful lot of help. But pretty much from that point onwards, it was like when Aberdeen are going to score rather than if. I think there's Miovski's had the headlines in recent weeks, probably rightly so. But there are a couple of players I thought that were Jensen and Gartenman, the two, the left and right sided of the back three, were phenomenal again. They seem to be developing a bit of an understanding. They're good. They're really comfortable in possession. They're good going forward as well. One of the biggest problems from certainly the Hibs and Hearts game was the massive gap between the midfield and the defence, and nobody kind of stepping. The amount of times that Roos would play it out to one of the back three, they'd be looking for a ball forward, and there would be nobody coming for it. Last season, that was Yoba Ramadani. Obviously, they've been working on something with one of them takes the ball, one of them receives the ball, takes it forward. So I was impressed with both of them. They were good in the opposition box as well. And Connor Barron, who was phenomenal 2 seasons ago, looked like a real talent, looked like he was, we'd really struggled to keep hold of him. He was destined for the top, had a bad injury, kind of played in fits and starts last season and didn't look like anything like the player that he was before. He was brilliant. Like his dead balls were good. He was dropping deep and playing crossfield passes. Defensively was good, and he was playing sort of instead of Leighton Clarkson in a kind of similar sort of role, but was probably better all round defensively and sat a little deeper. But yeah, just good to see from him back in, and now there's talk that they're back in discussions with him about a new contract.
Because his deal expires in summer, doesn't it?
It expires next summer, yeah. And I mean, I think last season it was kind of like he's just not going to. He's either decided his heart's somewhere else, or the injury's not right, and the club has decided that maybe he's not going to get into the team and get as much time as playing time as this season with 50 odds fixtures. You would assume he's going to get plenty of game time. I think he was Barry Robson's captain of the under 21s, under 20s squad. So you'd assume he's going to get a fair bit more game time. But yeah, he had a really, really good game. Leighton Clarkson came on, set up Esther Sockler for his first Aberdeen goal. It looked like a matter of time before there would be more, before there was a bit of a daft push in the back from Rubezic, who is prone to such things. He actually had a good game until that point, but it's just prone to the odd bit of madness.
Yeah, I've seen Aberdeen fans saying they want Angus MacDonald back in. I mean, have they seen MacDonald this season?
He's come on. He has played, but he's not played very often. I think the other
when he has played, he did not look good at all.
No, I mean he's not been fit. I think, and he didn't have a pre-season, which has been the problem. Because I mean, also they've got Rhys Williams, who is still not back from an injury.
So you see.
He may just have been signed to be Leighton Clarkson's flatmate, and if that's the case, I'm absolutely cool with that. But and if that's what it took, then I'm fine with it. But I think you would have thought he would potentially have more football in him. I think Rubezic is a perfectly fine defender. He's just adapting a little bit and needs. I mean, if you look at the stats from the Serbian league, he got a ridiculous amount of bookings in a league where you imagine there was plenty of people and there was maybe a slightly higher tolerance for the more physical side of the game, which is a stereotype, but one I'm happy to stand behind. I'm not sure. Jury's still out a little bit. He tends to have had very, very good games and then do something daft. But it's certainly that three with the two the two with Jensen and Bachmann on either side look a lot more solid than they did a couple of weeks ago, and from I don't know, from a fortnight ago, just under, when it was like pretty doom and gloom for the amount of transfer, for the money that had been spent, and for the way the team was playing, and from some of the excuses that were made. The one point that Barry Robson did make, which was fair at the time and it did buy into, is the team just haven't played enough football together. I think they're starting to play more football together, and that's coming thick and fast. And you can see they're starting to develop something more. So, I mean, the last 5 minutes were a little more nervy. Ross County did have a chance late on that when the ball just dropped in the box. But ultimately, kind of picked up where they left off. Aberdeen left off on Sunday, and onto the semis and another game this season.
Yeah, Tom, I was going to ask that. That was one of the things that Robson bizarrely said in his press conference afterwards, that they've played more games than anyone else. Do you think he's just got a default sort of excuse maker? Because at this point, he doesn't. You've won 2 games back to back. You don't necessarily need to be making those excuses, or even having to give mitigation.
Especially when he lied and said Aberdeen have played more games than anybody else this season, when that's not true.
And it turns out they've played one of the few. So it's like
his default is he doesn't want a headline. His default is bat everything back. Like when they win, they have a great performance. When there's the long run of wins at the end of last season, it was one game at a time. Do you want the job? One game at a time. You will not give anyone a headline, and I'm not convinced that's media training. I think that's just this is a part of the job that I do, but it's not the bit that I do. So I think there's a lot of it's not an excuse. It's here's something that I'll throw out that he may or may not even believe it, but it's more of a sort of there's mitigating circumstances why it's taken a bit of time to get up to speed, and there's still a good few that aren't there yet. I mean, we've been chatting about it in the group chat a few times, and I think that when there was pressure a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of quite daft calls for, quite a daft amount of pressure, given the only reason that we are where we are is because he was brought in. And I did think it will take time. Still perfectly confident in the season. I still think we've got I think it's relative to the rest of the strength of the league, it's the best squad depth that we've had in 20 years, maybe more. I think there's a lot of players that haven't played or haven't had an awful lot of game time that are very good players and would easily get into other squads in the league. So there is an element of just take it as it comes, but he has been prone to the odd bit of the balmy weather and AB being a factor in the energy sapping. Some of the energy sapping games was probably a bit of a stretch, but no, I think it's just a default kind of we're giving nothing away.
Before we move on, just briefly on Ross County. Jack Baldwin. County fans are just getting a bit sick of it by this point that he seems to continually be letting the side down in big moments, and yet he's untouchable in the starting 11. It was part of the frustrations that Mark McDonald was laying out when he was on the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, a couple of weeks ago, and that there's certain players under Malky who don't seem to ever get dropped, and he is one of them. And Jordan White was another, and Jordan White actually was dropped for this game, which leads me to my question, Tom. Surely Flash Scores formation setup isn't right. Surely it wasn't Simon Murray in the hole behind Jan Danda and Josh Sims, was it?
No.
Right. Thank God for that. I thought Malky taking a leave of his senses. It would be the first thing.
Redacted.
So what was it? I think it was Sims and Murray up front and Dandan behind.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes a lot more sense. Right, let us move on to our third game, and let's break from the doing the 3 Wednesday games because the Rangers one is the least interesting of the lot, but we'll get to that soon enough. Let's get to Tuesday night, where Hearts managed to defeat Kilmarnock by 2-1. Hearts taking the lead through George Grant. An excellent finish. Killie get themselves level midway through the second period. I've actually blanked on who scored for Killie. Somebody help me out.
Lions.
Yeah, so of course it was Brad Lyons who had done the glasses celebration. I remember that now. And then it looked to be headed for extra time. Another 30 minutes. I was like, oh God, I can't handle this. And especially since Hearts were making subs I wasn't entirely enamoured with, including the man who scored the winning goal, Alex Lowry. Continuing his very strange start to his Hearts career, where he was incredible in his debut off the bench against St Johnstone, pretty much was the main reason Hearts won that game. Had 3 assists against Partick Thistle, not very good, and looked terrible in just about every other match. But he came up with the goods, an excellent finish, and a lovely bit of composure as well to get himself the shooting chance for that, winning the game for Hearts in stoppage time. Can't beat a stoppage time winner in a cup game. And overall, when Hearts played Aberdeen, I was on the podcast after here, and I said, I think this papers over the cracks. I don't think Hearts were good at all. I just think they were better than a really poor Aberdeen side. And there wasn't really anything in the performance that I saw which I thought showed that Hearts had turned a corner under Stephen Naismith. So I want to preface that when I'm saying I'm certainly not overreacting to this game. But there was actually starting... there was a... As Telfer likes to say, there was a kernel. There was hope that things could be turned around under Stephen Naismith, and we don't have to sink lower, or how low we have to get before the board makes a decision for this to be a successful season for Hearts, which is what I'd kind of presumed before this game. There was stuff in this game that I liked that made me think that, okay, maybe Naismith actually does have an idea of what he's doing and things could get better. I mean, George Grant playing in the number 10 worked very well. It's the first time he's really... I mean, I can't remember many opportunities where he's been given that responsibility. I think Naismith's first game against Hibs, where he was absolutely crap and done nothing except for turn backwards all the time. But I think he just, like, under Nielsen never really seemed to trust him at all, especially playing him further forward. And I wonder whether his confidence was just shot to bits at that point, because he looked confident on Tuesday. He was one of the best players on the park during his time and excellently taken goal, and that's a bit of hope. Also as well, the midfield, before Cammy Devlin went off at half-time through illness, looked very good. Cammy Devlin I thought was great in the first half. Callum Nieuwenhof, similarly very good throughout his time on the pitch. That midfield started to get a bit creaky when Peter Haring came on, who, as much as it pains me to say, is starting to look done. That he never really had much pace. He then lost pace with his injury, and I think being out for 6 months last season has sapped him of even more. And it just seems like he's really not got enough left in the tank, especially in games away from home when the game's a bit more stretched, as it certainly was in that second period. Naismith has finally figured out that Boyce and Shanklin can't play together. And the thing I really didn't like about the substitution for Lowry was that we took off a Rolly player left with pace, and it was going to be Boyce and Shanklin up front together, which ended up working. But I think for any sustained period in matches, or for one-off matches, it could work. It worked against Rosenborg, for instance, but if you're playing that system all the time, teams are just going to work out that none of them can run, and it just takes away so much part of your game. But Naismith finally realising that they can't play them both together is another good side. So there was a few good sides. I can get to some of the negatives first, but Duncan, you're itching to get involved here, so I'll go to you first.
Yeah, it was just more on the Haring. Is that a sustained over his appearances this week, or is it just based on Tuesday?
This season
Tuesday was a very difficult. I mean, let's talk about the surface, because why not? We're a Scottish football podcast after all. That was tricky. Let's acknowledge the conditions were trickier than ever. I mean, it was proper sliding on Astro, which is quite an achievement, really.
Yeah, I mean, conditions were tricky, and it certainly didn't suit someone like Haring. However, he was easily Hearts' worst player against Aberdeen.
Okay.
Against opponents who barely turned up. So that tells you a lot, and he's not looked... I can't even think of a game this season where I think he's looked pretty good. Actually, maybe Rosenborg away came on at half-time and helped balance the midfield a wee bit. But Rosenborg weren't any great shakes, were they? But otherwise, and even when he came back last season, I thought there was a couple of games where he struggled. A couple of games where he played well, but a couple of games where he struggled. And he's now, I think, the wrong side of 30. And I think it's just maybe a bit too much for him now. But I assume I'm not the only one who watched this game.
Yeah, I caught most of it. But I was driving back from my new work. So it was. I think Derek McInnes was absolutely right when he came out in his interviews afterwards and slated Kilmarnock for their naivety in terms of how they defended and how they played in the last few minutes. Very un-Derek McInnes like, in that. Yeah, it was quite bizarre. And I genuinely thought that if had it gone to extra time, I thought Kilmarnock where it felt like they were in the ascendancy and would have probably done the business even before penalties, I think. But yeah, you can't, like, it must be so frustrating if you're Kilmarnock, because they really didn't show up that much, and you've done the hard part of knocking Celtic out in the previous round, and then you get the home draw against Hearts, and it's televised again, and Hearts aren't in any great shakes and stuff, and then you just fail to perform, and I think that's a real worry, especially when you get yourself back into the game as well. But I suppose that's something for McInnes to reflect on, in terms of it's not entirely upward trajectory all the time at the moment with Kilmarnock.
Hearts struggled a bit more in the second half. I still thought it was, because for as good as I thought Hearts were good in the first half, second half Killie were the better side for long periods, but they were chasing the game for 20 minutes or so as well. And after that, I thought it was a fairly even game after it went one each. But Rowles, again, struggled. Frankie Kent, I think both of them struggled against Kyle Vassell, who's...
He's just a nuisance. Like, he's just like a good, like...
And very physical.
Yeah. And why wouldn't you, if you're a Scottish Premiership team, want to have someone like that? Like, that is going to be that endeavour. And then if you can ally it with even a remote ability to shoot on target or have any... sort of ability, is always going to be rewarded in this league.
Kenneth Vargas had probably his worst game in a Hearts top. Toby Sibbick was dodgy at right back, although that was just mainly Sibbick style kind of brain farts. So it's not necessarily that he was like struggling because he was out of position, although I think he could have maybe done a wee bit better to try and stop the cross for the goal. But that was something that Rob and I disagreed on afterwards, Rob, because I thought he played well there. I don't think he did, but I can see why you would maybe like the idea of Sibbick at right back, because he can carry the ball out, and defensively he's better than Nathaniel Atkinson. Shankland, 2 great touches in both the goals, but still looks a little bit out of sorts. And Alan Forrest didn't play well, but Alan Forrest's directness, I think, is something that this team actually needs. It just needs it to come from a player with, as really cruel as it is to say, with just a bit more talent or a bit more confidence. Because when Alan Forrest first came to Hearts, he did look like he would be a good first team player, and after that initial first couple of months, he's just really not been at it at all, and it looks like a lack of talent. It really does. It might not be the case. It might just be that he's not got his confidence back, and he needs to play for a Livingston or a team of that nature to get his mojo rediscovered as a Scottish top flight player. But at the same time, we need somebody that's going to take the ball and run at the opposition, and he does still do that. So it's a difficult one with him in the team. As for Killie, I think they made a change in the second. Hearts made a change in the second half because Killie were really starting to get in the ascendancy in the game, and a lot of it was down to how much Vassell was really causing the defence problems, and Killie were just feeding off that very well. And then Hearts changed to a 3-5-2. Michael Stewart in the commentary said that he felt that it was a mistake from Hearts. I couldn't have disagreed anymore. I thought that they pushed Kennedy up alongside. They pushed Kennedy in a central role, playing alongside Vassell. So there was 2 players to worry about there. And Vassell was dominating the 2 centre halves enough that they needed a third one. They needed a third person to hang about there. And I felt Hearts got more of a grip in the game after they'd done that. And then Killie themselves even went to a 3-5-2 because Hearts were started to get a foothold more in the match. So it shows you that Hearts had done something right. And I think getting Corey and Daba back, he came on as sub, will help Killie, because I think they are a bit hamstrung by playing these 4 centre-halves in the one team. And it also means that Joe Wright ends up in the side as well. And Robbie Dees, good player at this level. Lewis Mayo, good player at this level. Stuart Finlay, I've been a little underwhelmed with him so far this season, but he's proven in the past, good player, and he's still got many years left in him. He'll eventually come good. Joe Wright sticks out as a sore thumb in that unit. I don't think he's necessarily a bad player, he's just not on that level. And once they could go back to a kind of proper 3-5-2 with 3 very good centre-backs and get wing-backs in there that McInnes trusts, and he trusts in Daba, he doesn't trust really anybody else on the left, then I think Killie will be better for it.
Going to ask, how have sales of bed sheets and spray paint gone down in Gorgie this week?
What a bunch of overreactive knobs. Christ. I mean, I'm not happy either. I think
You're a Scottish football fan. Like, when was this great period where we're all fucking delighted about our lot in life? It's mental.
I think the decision to hire Naismith it's still looking like a wrong one at this moment in time. With all the farce that went with it, with the fact that the boardroom seems pretty split on giving him the first place, there was a lot that went into that, which after Andrew McKinley himself, he wanted the next manager to be a proven winner, the fact that they've spent 6 figures many times on players and aren't pushing the boat out to get a really kind of manager with that, using that same ambition to go out and get a manager.
And Nick Montgomery, per se.
There's a lot to really dislike in this one decision, but I mean, come on. Like, the way the club is run, like, posted profits every year, the fact that, like, they want Anne Budge off the board. Do you want Anne Budge off the board, did you still want James Anderson's money? Because the two can't come at the same time, by the way. It just really gets on my nerves. You go through a poor spell, and after finishing third, should have finished third last season, Robbie Nielsen just fell in love with playing Robert Snodgrass too much, and that's ultimately the reason why our season went in the ditch. And yeah, it's all the board's fault, and you need to sack the board. Sack the board is when the board are literally running your club into the ground. That's not happening.
But you guys can all do that because you're all co-owners. Is that not how this thing works?
Duncan said many times it is fan owned. It's not fan run.
Oh,
and
okay.
just as fucking well.
Yeah, because otherwise
sack the board's very.
Yeah, the impression
sack the board's very 90s as well. It's good.
yeah.
It's a throwback.
I think I can remember.
We're not going to sack the manager, sack the board. Just don't know what that means anymore. But
yeah, because a real danger looking like a support full of bedwetters, and that couldn't have that.
That's why there were bed sheets, Duncan.
That's why we've got plenty of spares.
Stained.
Some angry mothers back home.
Right, let's get to our final game, which was Rangers 4, Livingston 2. I've talked for ages about Hearts.
2?
Sorry, Rangers 4, Livingston 0. I don't know where I got 2 from there. Rangers 4, Livingston 0. I think I was thinking of you too, because I was thinking, like, you guys. Because I was thinking, I've talked for ages, so can somebody take the lead in this one, and then I'll come in with my thoughts on this game. Thom, how about you? You've not said anything in a while.
Yeah. I mean, it's one where it was both a thoroughly deserved win and the scoreline fully reflects the result, but the headline is all about the first goal, and David Martindale quite rightly pointing out
it's so bizarre.
It's bizarre, and it reflects particularly badly, I think, on Nick Walsh. So what we're talking about is Sima's opening goal, which was a phenomenally good finish from a really, really tight angle, but there's a clear push on Jamie Brandon in the build up, hand on the shoulder. It's not tenuous, and I think it's almost like everyone watching it stopped. Even to some extent, I'm not even sure Sima would shoot from there if he didn't think this is definitely going to get pulled back for the foul. But it doesn't. Now it does, and Nick Walsh's VAR for reviewing it doesn't see any reason to pull it back. Now, that's difficult enough, and I hate the VAR discussions, but there's this one in particular is kind of the root of what my biggest problem with the whole thing has been. Is a couple of weekends ago, the Nick Walsh ruling out for a foul at St Mirren, the Michael Mandron decision for exactly the same thing, pulling it back immediately, and he's on the field, and he was the referee, and he immediately pulled it back.
Sorry, Tom, just to interject, he didn't actually immediately pull it back. He let the play continue, and then Mandron scored, and then so he let the play continue so that if it went to VAR, but then he blew his whistle once the ball in the back of the net. So he's basically saying, "I think that's a foul. I've let it be a goal. I think that's a foul. But if I'm wrong, VAR will overturn me." Which I actually think is what. No, he didn't blow the whistle right away.
Not right away, but
No.
he blew the whistle before he put it in the net.
I don't know. Actually, I'm pretty sure he didn't. You can see in the replays that he waits, and then after the ball goes in the back of the net, then he points up the field.
I may be wrong, but my recollection is that he blows before he shoots, and one of the reasons why.
I shall investigate this if you want to keep going.
Cool. But so as the referee, he sees that. The problem that I've got with it is we've now introduced this idea of perfection. And we've introduced the idea that and it's not that there's delays, and yes, there's contentious decisions, and yes, some things, we're getting into the technicalities and the legalities of things. The problem I've got is that we've introduced this idea that all incidents are going to be correctly applied, and there's going to be some level of fairness to this. There's more accuracy, but it means there's going to be far more scrutiny when things go wrong. Now, I'm caveating all of this. Rangers absolutely battered Livy. Livy weren't really in it. Rangers could easily have won by more than the 4 that they got. They looked a hell of a lot better than the team that had played at Motherwell against Motherwell at the weekend. They looked a lot more fluid. There was an awful lot, and Simo caused an awful lot of problems. He looked like properly dangerous throughout. But the opening goal came from something that, and the way that Livingston play, how defensively minded they have to be, how combative they need to be for that the entire fixture effectively hung on that one particular incident. And it was a really obvious one. It seemed like a really, really obvious one to give, and nobody would have been particularly frustrated with it.
I've got it here now. I've got the previous incident here now. If we want to listen into this.
Oh, we're going live.
Okay. Right, foul. No, there's no whistle.
I hear nothing.
There's no whistle. There's no whistle till that ball goes in the back of the net. I'm fairly certain there. Did my mic not pick? Did you not hear that through my mic?
I didn't. I didn't hear it. I don't know.
Also, I watched the sports scene of that. I watched the sports scene of that. Actually, you know what? I kind of
the point stands though. The point is, the
referee
on the pitch, like the semantics of it, or the order of it, the point is that as the VAR, he's decided that that's okay. When it's gone on the pitch, as the referee, he's decided that's not. And one of those was a far more egregious foul than the other. That's what it is for me. I disagree to an extent. What I disagree with is I think the issue is, and this is why I think VAR is pointless. Because.
You don't need to finish this argument now.
But in this instance, so and if you compare the two, because they're both the same to some extent. They're both in my opinion the wrong decision. So when you see when Nick Walsh as referee in that Hearts St Mirren game gives the foul against Michael Mandron for the push on Frankie Kent, the VAR has to be what is it, beyond reasonable doubt or whatever it's not beyond reasonable doubt. What is it? Clear and obvious. It's a clear and obvious error by the official. I would think it actually does look a bit clear and obvious. I don't think there is much contact, but the camera angles weren't good enough to conclusively show that Mandron didn't actually foul Kent because of the angle. Mandron's kind of camera side of him and Kent's the other side, so it's hard to tell if there is something. Walsh might have had a better angle at looking at that at the time, because he was behind the play, where the camera angle wasn't. I'm not sure, but the angle that we saw was one that it was hard to tell. There might have been other ones that showed a bit more. I don't know, but they stuck with that original decision because there wasn't enough to say that was overturned. Now, going to the game on Wednesday, again, I still think it should. I still think having checked with VAR, VAR should have intervened and said, right, okay, you need to. Well, this is the minimum one. It should have been allowed to be a goal, and this one it should have been chalked off. VAR should have intervened and changed the referee's decision, or at least tried to get the referee to change his decision by going over to the monitor. But I can also understand to a degree why it wasn't given, because when you see replays like that, where it's just like it's a hand coming out, it doesn't look like there's really much force behind the shove. And you think, oh, it's Brandon going down a little bit too easy there to buy a foul. And again, it goes to that thing. It's like, okay, is it a clear and obvious error? Maybe it's not a clear and obvious error. So okay, let's stick with the referee's decision. And that's why it barely works, because it's still down to subjectivity. You'll get referees looking at that and saying, that's definitely a foul, because you can see he's clearly put his arm out, he's clearly made contact with him, he's clearly gone down. The other referees say, well, yes, he's done all that, but I think that contact is negligible, and I think Jamie Brandon is buying that foul. You get one lot of referees saying one thing, one lot of referees saying another, and that's why VAR is a lot of shite.
But we've introduced perfection. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
there's no such thing, and there's certainly there's no such thing as perfection in any walk of life, really. But there's certainly none of it when it comes to refereeing
Speak for
decisions.
yourself.
Of course, President Company excluded Duncan.
Yeah, of course. At risk of us sounding like a Celtic podcast that's debated a Rangers refereeing decision for 15 minutes. Aside from that, did we learn anything from this game?
I think we learned maybe more about Livingston, and what happened to Livingston that used to always give the Old Firm a hard game?
Well,
they were really passive in this match, really passive.
Martindale said that he, reflecting on it, that he probably didn't make the changes, and whatever he did, his preparation and etc. could have been better. He didn't really go into great details on that. But I don't know. The impression you get now of Livingston is that cohesiveness has gone. That intangible, dogs of war sort of stuff is that it feels like a resignation.
They don't have the chaos factor.
Yeah, there's a resignation to this idea that the whereas once we say we have the lowest budget in the league, we're plucky, they don't know what they're expecting. It's now we have the lowest budget in the league. You cannot expect us to compete. And I don't know, like it feels that even Martindale seems to have lost his.
Yeah, there was. I thought it was a strange decision. And it was a strange decision not to start Mo Sangari for this one, because Mo Sangari was easily Livingston's most dangerous player against Celtic, and what he was very good at was breaking the lines and charging up and causing issues, as evidenced by the red card to Joe Hart.
Yeah.
So he didn't start in this one, even though Rangers midfield are quite crap at tracking runners. That just seems like a really odd tactical choice from Martindale. And I know he's made some odd tactical choices in the past, but he tends to do that when he overthinks, and this one seemed like he wasn't thinking enough about what he had.
I feel like we're on like we're coming down the mountain from peak Livingston. I just feel like the combined last night combined with Saturday's performance, like I can't imagine any Livingston of the last few seasons getting that opportunity where Celtic get their keeper sent off and stuff like that, and still not being in the game. Like the kind of not seeing that as a huge opportunity as opposed to being quite timid. And I think the timidity has come into Livingston Football Club, which is not something you ever expected over the last few years.
I did think that Livingston posed a bit of a threat in the 10 minutes or so leading up to the second goal, and that was when Rangers. I was wondering if Rangers were going to put in another second half performance like the one I saw them play against Motherwell. But then Ridvan Yilmaz scores an excellent goal to put the game beyond doubt, and now the onus is on him to try and, at least in domestic football, because he's not been put in the European squad, to try and make that left back spot his own, because they've been dying for him to replace Borna Barisic as the successor to that left back spot that Barisic has basically been sleepwalking in for the past, since the COVID season.
Beale said he was complaining of cramp when he came off, though. So there you go. And Kmart Roof also struggling. Like what a bunch of soft boys. Genuinely, like they're really. a shadow of what you would really expect from Rangers in the past. Again,
Right,
sorry,
guys.
that was very much getting in towards a Celtic podcast territory there, wasn't it? Sorry.
But we should probably end on the fact that they won 4-0, were really quite fluid in the second half. Seema looks
I think they were fluid once they got that 2-goal advantage. Once they got a bit of... it should be said that Livingston standing off them for the entire game, and then Livingston looked completely defeated after going 2-0 down. It helped Rangers look really confident and really fluid. And I don't know, I think a better opponent might have given Rangers... it's an easy thing to say, but I think you know what I'm getting at when I say like a better opponent and a more confident and aggressive opponent would have given Rangers a much harder evening than Livingston ultimately did.
Craig Fowler, you were going to. You asked us to remind you of something.
Yes. Thank you very much,
setting
Duncan.
you up there for a sort of outro.
So at the end of this show, for those who listen often will know that I plug our Patreon at patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. So the month of October is going to be Open the Vault month, where we will be posting old Patreon episodes from the past, probably within the last year, on our free-to-air feed for those of you who have not signed up to the Patreon to listen. Now, obviously, you know exactly what our motivation is here, but we're letting you know what kind of content you can get if you want to sign up for the Patreon. And as I've said, time and time again, the lowest tier is only £2 a month. You get 2 additional podcasts per week for that. The highest tier is £5 a month, and you get 5. So you get your 2 for the £2, and you get an additional 3, 5 additional podcasts. Sorry, I said a month. A week. You get 2 additional a week, and then another 5 a week if you pay a $5. So that can be 7 podcasts a week just for a $5 a month. What bargain that is.
It's like 28 extra podcasts a month, roughly.
Yeah, there you go. Wait,
I don't speak to anyone as much as that.
That's
20. 20. I'm talking shit. Yep, there we go. But you can see I tapped out at standard grade maths and didn't go on to higher. Right there.
Duncan, we do often have weeks where we go over our quota of 5 on the Patreon. So
we're just so good to people.
We really are. I mean, what can you get now for £5? Like, just £5 in general. I've seen meal deals now that are over a £5.
You struggle to get a
Eat
pint?
this podcast instead.
There you go. That's it. We can go now. That is it. Yeah.
Again, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. Right, Thom, say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Duncan, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And this is Craig Fowler. And with the weekend coming up, for those of you listening, I hope you enjoy your football. Goodbye.